Hi, everyone. Crista Cowan here. I am the corporate genealogist here at Ancestry. Some of you may know me as the Barefoot Genealogist. And every other Tuesday, I'm live here on Facebook. Today, we're doing things a little bit differently. I am also live streaming simultaneously over on the Ancestry YouTube channel because I have a special guest with me today. And we're going to be talking about something very timely for back to school. So while you're joining us live, please know that the chat is open and put your comments in there. I've got Mason and Catherine are monitoring the chat. We will have some time for Q&A after my discussion with our guest today. So let me go ahead and bring her on. Our guest today is Love Foy, and Love is an educator. She is the coordinator of secondary language arts and reading for Half Hollow Hills Central School District in New York. Love, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Welcome. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I am thrilled that you're here. You and I have had the opportunity to talk over the last few months about some family history research, and I know you have a passion for that. We'll certainly get into that, but I would love if you could just tell us a little bit about your education background.
Sure. So I am a coordinator for English language arts at the secondary level in my school district here in Long Island, New York. And I work with English and reading teachers just to, as you know, get students their language ready for college and career. But I have a passion for Ancestry. And a few years ago, I applied for the Ancestry grant for my school district. And I've been doing workshops, yearly workshops, well, biannual, really, sometimes 3 a year, with the teachers and training them and just getting them up to speed on AncestryClassroom and ways to incorporate it into their teaching. And although I supervise English teachers, the workshops are district-wide, so any teacher can come, elementary, middle school, high school. And it's a combination of introducing Ancestry in general and the work that's there just as an individual, but also then taking that and applying it in the classroom setting, specifically with the AncestryClassroom resources. And I've gotten so much positive feedback from teachers about this work. I've been doing this workshop now for about 3 or 4 years. Every time I do it, I add something new. Ancestry is constantly adding something new, so there's always something new to do with them and to show them. And we've been having a ball with it, I just have to say. We've been having a lot of fun.
I love it. I love that you've been using this program. So we'll talk about, I want to make sure everybody knows a little bit more about AncestryClassroom. So for those of you who are watching, if you are a parent or grandparent of school-age children, I think this certainly applies to you. It's something that you might be interested in utilizing with your school-age child in your life. But if your child is in school, this is also something that you can take to the school district. And so we're going to share a little bit about that. Before we do, Love, I would just love to know a little bit more about what it is that got you interested in family history to begin with.
So I've been an Ancestry member. I think I joined over 10 years ago. So it's been a long time, but I always was interested in my family tree. My family used to do a reunion every year, but the booklet that had our family tree, it stopped after like maybe 2 generations. And I always was curious, well, what's beyond those, that my grandparents, I want to know. So I joined Ancestry and started building the family tree. And soon after that, I did the DNA test as well. And ever since then, I was just building and building the tree. And I've learned so much. It's made me a history buff because I've learned so much about American history in researching my own family's history. And I find that even though I'm an English person, I have these great conversations now with the social studies teachers just because I've developed this really sort of keen interest in American history. So that was an interesting sort of like side thing that came out of it, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. I love that you got officially interested as an adult, but it sounds like you had kind of a family tradition with reunions and other things of being connected to your extended family. Is that an accurate representation?
Yes.
So I over on my Instagram today and then for the last few weeks, I've been asking some questions, and it's been really interesting. So one of the questions that I asked was how old people were when they first got interested in family history. And one of the things that I learned is that most people were between the ages of about 8 and 15 when they first showed some kind of interest. Now, not everybody is a family history nerd like I am. I got into it hardcore when I was 12. But then another question I asked in an Instagram poll was how many people did a family history project in school? And it was about 60 to 65% that were introduced to the actual process of family history through some kind of a school project. And I remember doing a family tree. I think I was in 5th or 6th grade. So a lot of people, that's their introduction to family history. And one of the reasons it's so important is family history, like you said, it helps connect you to history, but it also helps just connect you. There's this grounding feeling of belonging that comes as you start to understand that. Ancestry did a survey in 2020, and about 70% of Americans said that they felt a greater sense of connection and belonging when learning stories about their ancestors in particular. So Ancestry has created AncestryClassroom. And for those of you who aren't aware of it, we'll provide a link to that, the website in the description for this video once we're finished here today. But Love, I would just appreciate if you would just take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about what AncestryClassroom is and maybe how you're using it in your school district.
So I came upon AncestryClassroom by accident because I had contacted Ancestry and I said, I designed this workshop for my teachers on Ancestry, and I how can we use it, because it is sort of like a paid site that you have to have a membership. And they wrote me back and says, well, we actually have something called AncestryClassroom that you can apply for a grant and you can get access to it for free for your teachers. Well, I think I probably did a backflip. Or I tried to do one anyway, because then I was like, this is awesome. And so I kind of stumbled upon it and I just fell in love, because it really provides students and teachers with just about all of the resources that you get as an individual, like personal owner of an account. And it does that through this grant for schools, for K-12 schools. So that was my initial introduction to it. But what it does is it basically allows children and teachers to use it as either, for individual sort of family research or historical research. So you can go in, there are resources. Let's say you're doing a project on, Frederick Douglass or Thomas Jefferson. They can go in, and I think it's amazing when students, they've read about, a historical figure in a textbook, but then to like go in and see that person's family listed in sort of like a census, right? Or a marriage certificate for that person, or some kind of a war, like, they had to sign up for the military, a military record. It just brings that person to life in a way that's sort of real and concrete, and sort of like just allows that child to see the historical figure as a person, as a real human being. And so I think looking at those records, accessing them, is what makes it so unique and so special. And you just there are not a lot of places where you can get that. There are not a lot of places where you can do that kind of work. So
yeah, I still remember being like 10 or 11 years old, and my uncle sitting me down and showing me on microfilm back then, but my first census record. And there is something about those original documents. And it doesn't even matter whether you're touching the tangible record or viewing it on a computer screen, just knowing that it's a replica of that original document, written in the time, created at the time of this event, that really connects you to history in a visceral way.
Absolutely. Because you start to see the story of that person's life in your head, and the census alone gives you so much information. So yes, they have the person's name, and you see, oh, they were married, they had this many children, where did they live? Oh, where were their parents born? What did they do for a living? Did they own their house? Do they have a mortgage? Like, there's all of this information. So you start to tell this story of this person in your head. And then if that person is now related to you, let's say it's not just a school project for a historical figure, but it's someone in your own family, that there's this connection that naturally develops. And then it just entices you, to go in for more. And so I find that both the teachers and the students just kind of fall in love with it.
Yeah, I love it. So earlier this year, as part of Ancestry Classroom, Ancestry launched a new thing called the Family History Starter Kit. So the starter kit is for educators and parents or guardians, and they're just really foundational lesson plans and materials. They were created by professional genealogists here at Ancestry. Love, you participated in helping to create those. Can you tell us a little bit about just what some of the mindset that went into helping to create some of those family history starter kit lessons?
Sure. So it can be overwhelming if you go in for the first time. And the goal of the starter kit was to sort of break down the process and make it sort of easier, sort of user friendly for a first time teacher or even for someone who has experience using Ancestry. So we start off with, what is Ancestry? What is family history? And why is it important? Why is it valuable to sort of learn, one's history, put together a family tree? Then we talk about the process of, creating a tree and using sort of like, we have a PDF in the classroom kit where students can kind of go in into the PDF and manually start to build a tree. They are sort of a sort of document for them to keep track of any documents that they might find about a grandparent or a great grandparent or an aunt or whatever. We also have lots of links to additional Ancestry materials. There's some great videos that you've done, Crista, and so many wonderful videos to help train our teachers and students. The little ones, the 5-minute the genealogy in a minute, and then you've got the longer videos. So those are fabulous. They're fantastic for the classroom setting. But there are also some of the other videos like the Lance Bass video, where we kind of, they interview, famous people and we see their reaction when they learn about some of their own history. Like he found out he was cousins with Britney Spears. That's one of my favorite Ancestry videos because he's so shocked and also just so happy about it because they were, friends for so long. But there are other materials there too. We have whole sort of like lesson plan sets and documents for research. So if you're doing something on, World War II or World War I and you want to kind of dive in and you need some direction, well, where do I start? Where do I begin? Where do I finish? If you're looking at literature, you're looking for documents on the Holocaust, you can find that there. So it's packaged for you as a teacher to kind of go in and get started immediately, even if you feel, oh, I don't know that much about this. We've kind of done the structuring of it for you, basically.
Yeah. So that family history starter kit, I love it. Teaches kids skills like interviewing, which is useful across a multitude of things that they might encounter in their lives, not just in family history. It helps them learn to understand and cite primary sources and kind of the difference between primary information and secondary information, which again is a lifelong skill that will benefit them. And then they get to just explore the stories of those history makers who went before them, whether those history makers are personally related to them or not. And I think that's important to start to understand people from history as not just a figurehead or not just a story or a fable, but as real people who lived real lives, and these documents that were created in their life that, like you mentioned earlier, start to tell the story of their life in a way that sometimes the history books don't always do. So that's one of the things that I love about those lessons that we've created together in that starter kit.
Yes, I agree.
Another thing that we have available in Ancestry Classroom is just some deeper tools. You hinted about some of them when you talked about World War II and the Holocaust. Ancestry partnered with an organization called Facing History and Ourselves. And in the world that we live in today, this is this global organization that uses the lessons of history to challenge teachers and students to stand up to bigotry and to hate. We've developed this robust collection of resources for teachers that includes, like you mentioned, educational videos and classroom resources, provides some historical context for some of the very difficult events in history and gives them a framework to have classroom discussions. And clearly it's geared towards students who are a little bit older. So talk to me a little bit about the age range of students that can get involved in family history and how teachers determine what's appropriate for what grade levels.
So some of the earlier lessons are really pretty of a wide range. You can start maybe in like 3rd or 4th grade, going all the way up to 12th grade. It's very generic, and you can go in and apply as needed. Once we get into the lessons that do a little bit of a deep dive, then the teacher might want to go in and say, well, I want to tailor this to my grade level. So like you were saying, the World War II lessons, the Holocaust lessons, those are tailored more for a secondary level student who's already done some of that study and some of that research. But the lessons where we are interviewing our parents or grandparents to create our family tree, the lessons on what is family history, those lessons are very open and are available for really all grade levels. I would say third, fourth grade, all the way up through high school. But as teachers go through them, they will be able to see and tailor each of those lessons to the grade level that they're working with. I think they're very user friendly, very teacher friendly for a number of grades across the spectrum.
Fantastic. Okay, well, so you mentioned that you applied for a grant, and so that's kind of how this works for those of you, again, who are educators or who are parents or guardians or grandparents of school-aged children who might want to put this forward to your school district as a resource. You just go to AncestryClassroom.com. And the information is there to sign up. There's free access available to all the original and primary documents of Ancestry's curriculum, of Ancestry's collections to use in the curriculum. It is a world membership for those of you who are familiar with how the Ancestry subscriptions work. So it includes all the global records, as well as access to Fold 3, which is our military records collection, newspapers.com, which is primarily military records available, or newspapers, which is primarily historical newspapers, some dating back as early as the 1700s, includes newspapers. I could go on for days about newspapers. I find them a fascinating resource to use, not just in my own family history research, but also in teaching. So again, that's AncestryClassroom.com. Now, I just want to open it up to some questions. And so if any of you have questions about the Ancestry Classroom service, about using family history to get children excited about history, excited about family history. Again, I just want to remind people that family history has such a grounding and connecting influence on kids. As a matter of fact, some of my nephews live locally, and they called me this morning and said, school starts tomorrow, and the last thing we want to do before school starts is come have lunch with you at the Ancestry Cafe. And so they were here for lunch today, and I told them that I was going to be doing this, and they were like, we would like it if our teachers would ask us about family history because we know stuff because of you. And so it's just kind of fun to know that, that I've been able to share that with them. They're nowhere near as passionate as I am about things, but I've seen the influence that it has on them. Every time we drive through the town that we live in, even though, I'm a fifth generation Los Angelino and didn't move here to Utah till I was an adult, they just happened to live, and I happened to work in the town that one of our third great grandfathers founded. And when we discovered that and were able to make that connection to them, for them, that's the sense of connection to the place that they live. And that has been really empowering for them. And so it's been fun to watch that play out just in the lives of my own family members.
Yeah.
So we've got time for questions. Let's go ahead and take a look at what some of the questions are that you have. There are some shout outs here. Let me just read through some of these. The genealogy archaeologist says, thank you, love, for doing what you do. Yes, thank you for being an educator. Thank you for helping educators. That is something that is much needed today. And thank you for your passion. I've always been impressed with that about you.
Thank you so much.
Let's see. Candy says, this is amazing. It sounds like it's going to bring family history to life for kids. Yes, absolutely. Betsy says she's a genealogy merit badge counselor for the Boy Scouts. When she does yeah, right. She has Scouts sign up to learn about their ancestors, but without access to Ancestry, their research is limited. She wished this was available to boys and girls doing the Scout genealogy merit badge. So yeah, Betsy, that is a great idea. I will certainly take that back. Currently, we have about 7 million children who have gone through the Ancestry Classroom programs, and we're looking for ways to expand that. We are expanding that. We've started to expand that globally, so lots of different options and opportunities there that we'll certainly keep an eye on. Tanya is an English teacher. Thank you, Tanya. And she says she does family trees with her students. So hopefully, Tanya, this will give you some additional resources to do that. Okay, so question. What resources are available if a student's family isn't comfortable with their student researching their family tree? Or this isn't in the question, but something I got through my Instagram earlier today when I put some of the questions out was, what if you have a child who is in foster care or who is adopted and is uncomfortable exploring their family history? So, Love, I would just appreciate hearing what you have to say about that.
Yeah. So we actually do include a permission slip in the classroom, in the Ancestry Starter Kit, to let parents know ahead of time. So that would be the first thing, is to send that home, gauge where their parents are, and if you find that you have several letters coming back saying, my child's a foster child, my child, we're not comfortable with this type of sort of dive into our personal family, that lets you know as a teacher how best to design the project. It doesn't have to be where students are individually researching their own family members. They can also do the same activity researching a historical figure. So you can have the whole class research historical figures, or you can have where some students research a historical figure, some research a family member. It depends on, the environment, if you're doing group work, how you're setting it up. But we do try to incorporate that. That's a very important, valid question. I would definitely send out that letter first, gauge the parent feedback, and then design your steps, your lessons from that point. But we do have sample lessons or sample activities to look into a historical figure. So if you like that, I think we have one on Roosevelt. There's one for Roosevelt, and there's a few others that are in there. So they can kind of give you a guide for how to do that with students who might not be ready or comfortable to research a family member.
Yeah, I remember I was given the Teddy Roosevelt lesson to test on my nephews when we were creating that, and it was interesting to watch how they interacted with that. And even when it's not a family member, just again making that connection to history, seeing real documents, understanding their lives in a little bit more context than we sometimes get otherwise, was kind of fun to watch them explore that a little bit. Okay, let's see. So Kathy is asking, does Ancestry still have an educator membership or discount that is separate from Ancestry Classroom? So we do not. So there's several ways you can access Ancestry, and this might answer the Boy Scout question as well a little bit. So a lot of libraries, especially here in the United States, have Ancestry available through their library. And depending on what level of subscription they've acquired, they'll either have US records or global records available at the library for free. And so that's certainly something if you're working with a Boy Scouts troop, or if you are an educator who's not quite sure yet if you want to dive into the full classroom experience, go to the local library and see what they have available and explore the site that way. But if you are an educator, for sure, go check out AncestryClassroom.com and see what resources are available to you there for free. Now, there is a student membership for Ancestry. So for anybody who is 18 years old, if you're a college student in particular, or if you have a college student, they can get, I think it's a $5 a month membership. If we go through a process of verifying their credentials as a student, and then they can access that discounted subscription. So we try to make Ancestry as accessible as possible for as many people as possible in as many places as possible, because we understand the importance of family history and of the connection that comes through that. So those are some of the resources that you can explore that might meet your particular needs. Okay, Shannon asks, can this be made available for homeschoolers? We don't have an external IP and never will. So the answer, Shannon, is that right now, Ancestry is only available to primary and accredited primary and secondary schools. But like I said earlier, we're always exploring new ways to make information available. I would for sure check out your local library to see what resources you have available there for homeschooling your own children. Debbie is asking, are we talking about grade school? So yes, again, all grades. Love, in your experience with the school district that you work with, are you working with all grades? Are you working primarily primary or primarily secondary?
So my workshops are K-12. I mean, I work primarily with secondary, middle, and high school teachers, but the workshops that I do in the district are K-12, and I get teachers from elementary, middle, and high school, and
Okay.
a variety of subject areas.
And do you find, just in your experience, like, how are some of the younger grades tailoring some of these things? I know you're really more familiar with the older grades, but what are some of the experiences for some of those younger grades?
I think for the younger grades, the teachers that I've spoken to, they do some of the basic lessons. So like the family interview, that's a great lesson. Even if you're just barely touching on some of the deeper research aspects of ancestry, just because it gives students it's a writing activity, it's a thinking activity, it's a craft, it's a good sort of writer's craft activity for students. So it's tailored to address many levels, but it actually fits very well with elementary, and teachers will find that they're doing similar activities anyway with students. So now you can do that activity but add this additional piece onto it just to give it a more of a personal flavor. And they also like the idea of, just understanding what are some of these different documents. What is a census? Like that's a good sort of conversation, a good lesson you could have with an elementary level classroom. So they can begin to understand, how does our government like count us? How do they know how many people live in the United States of America? Like that's a great question for kids to sort of explore and understand. So there are lots of ways to tailor it for a younger audience, for younger students.
Yeah, I love that. Shannon says, as a homeschool mom, one of the things that she's done with her boys, who are now 12 and 10, is take them to cemeteries, local cemeteries, and do things like see if you can find who the oldest person was that was born in the cemetery. I've done something similar with my nephews, where we go and look for all the family members and try to calculate, from the birth date to the death date, how old they were. And so you start to introduce not just connection, not just history, but sometimes math skills as well. And there's lots of different ways that you can incorporate that age appropriately with the children that you work with. Well, Love, thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything else that you would like to share with parents or educators before we wrap up?
Well, you said it already. I just want to remind some of the users that that Classroom now has expanded to the world, to the world access, so that in the past we didn't have access beyond the US. Now we have access beyond the US. The World Explorer package is part of Classroom. That's very exciting for us Ancestry Classroom users. I have many teachers who have family that are coming from outside of the US. And so now they can really go back and trace, and students can trace. New York, as you know, is a very diverse state. And so we have children from all over the world. So this is a really, really big thing for us. We're very excited. So I just wanted to remind everyone that if you haven't, gone in there yet, go in and check it out. Check out the World Explorer part of Ancestry Classroom.
Fantastic. Thank you again for joining us. I so appreciate it, and the work that you're doing. I think it's so important, and I hope that it's a model that other school districts will use throughout the country, and hopefully eventually in other countries around the world. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you have additional questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, either on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching this video. And Love, if you happen to get into the comments and want to respond, feel free, but I will for sure be in there over the next couple of days answering any additional questions that have come in. Go to AncestryClassroom.com if you are a teacher in particular, or if you're the parent of a school-age child who wants to encourage the educators of your children to learn more about what's available through Ancestry Classroom. Until next time, I'm Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.
Bye, everyone.